"Mom, you don't belong here anymore." The words hit me like a slap across the face. My son Tom had whispered those words, and though his voice was soft, they cut through me like a knife. I stood there, frozen in the kitchen, staring at him, my heart pounding in my chest. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I couldn't process what I had just heard. This was my home. The house I had lived in for 30 years, the house Robert and I had built together, the house I had raised Tom in. How could he say that? "You don't belong here anymore?" The words kept repeating in my head, like an echo I couldn't escape. But I couldn't show him how much it hurt. No, I had learned long ago that showing emotion only made things worse. I took a deep breath, tried to steady my hands, and forced a smile. "I see," I said, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look at me. Tom never looked at me when it mattered. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but I stayed silent. I didn't belong here anymore, according to him. It was as if all the years I spent caring for him, all the sacrifices I made for his happiness, had amounted to nothing. I glanced over at Romy, his wife, standing in the doorway. Her eyes were cold, indifferent, almost as if she was waiting for me to leave. I wanted to yell at her too, but instead I turned away, walked upstairs to my bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. My mind raced. What had I done wrong? Why was I being treated like this? I could still smell Robert's cologne on the pillow next to mine. His absence was suffocating. I reached over and picked up the letter from the lawyer. Robert had left me everything. Everything except this. The love I thought was unconditional. The family I had fought for, protected, and supported through thick and thin. Tom's words echoed in my mind again. "You don't belong here anymore." Was it all a lie? Had it always been a lie? Was I just a burden to them? A woman who had grown old and forgotten? I placed the letter on the nightstand and closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. All I could think about was the coldness in Tom's voice, the finality of those words. It felt like a door slamming shut, leaving me in the dark alone. The silence of the house was deafening. It used to be filled with laughter, with Robert's jokes and Tom's childish laughter. Now it was just me, alone with my thoughts, alone with the memories. I had been a good mother, hadn't I? I had done everything I could for him. I had always been there when he needed me. I had given up my own happiness to ensure his. And now, here I was being told I didn't belong. It was too much to process in one sitting. I needed to think. I needed to understand. How did things get so bad? How did my son become someone who could say something like that to me? My eyes drifted to the family photo on the wall. It was an old picture, one from when Tom was just a boy. We were happy then, weren't we? But what happened to that happiness? What happened to the love I thought we had? Was it just a facade? I wanted answers. I needed answers. I stood up, wiped my tears away, and walked back downstairs. Tom and Romy were sitting at the kitchen table, talking as if I didn't exist. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I kept it in check. I couldn't let them see me break. Not yet. I cleared my throat, and they both turned toward me, their expressions guarded. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady. Tom's face tightened, and Romy shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "What is it, Mom?" Tom asked, his voice flat. I could see the annoyance in his eyes. "I know what you're planning," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I know you want me gone. You want to sell this house, and you think I'm too old to take care of it. Well, you're wrong." Romy's face went pale, and Tom shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. "What are you talking about?" he asked, avoiding eye contact. "I've been doing some digging," I said, folding my arms across my chest. "I know you've been making arrangements to sell the house, to push me out of here." They both stared at me, caught off guard. For a moment there was silence. "Mom, that's not..." Tom started, but I held up my hand. "Don't lie to me, Tom," I said, my voice sharp now. "I've seen the paperwork. I know what you've been up to." Tom opened his mouth to say something, but I cut him off. "You think I don't know what's been going on? You think I didn't notice the way you and Romy have been avoiding me? You think I didn't hear the way you talked about me behind my back? Well, I'm not as blind as you think." I could see the guilt flicker in Tom's eyes, but Romy's expression remained cold, unaffected. "I'm not going anywhere," I continued. "I'm not going to let you push me out of my own home. This is my house, and I'm staying. For the first time, Tom looked at me, really looked at me. His expression softened, but there was something else there, something I couldn't quite place. It was regret. But was it too late for that? I stood there for a moment waiting for them to say something, anything. But there was nothing. Just silence. I turned and walked out of the room. As I made my way back upstairs, I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I didn't know what was going to happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. I had given so much to this family, and I wasn't going to lose it all now. Not without a fight. The next morning, I woke up with the heavy weight of Tom's words still pressing down on me. I had hoped it was all just a bad dream, but the reality of it all hit me like a cold wave as soon as I opened my eyes. The house felt different, quieter, emptier. I glanced around the room, taking in the familiar surroundings, the photos of Robert and me from better days, the soft blankets I had always made sure to keep warm for him. But now, with him gone, everything felt hollow. My heart ached as I reached over to his side of the bed, finding it cold and untouched. I ran my fingers across the pillow, remembering the nights we had spent there together, talking about the future, our dreams of growing old side by side. How quickly everything had changed. I stood up and went to the window, staring out at the yard where Robert used to garden. It was all so still now, just like me, just like my life without him. I walked downstairs slowly, each step echoing in the quiet house. The sound of the creaky wooden stairs seemed louder than usual. It was almost as if the house itself was mourning with me. I made my way into the kitchen, the room where Robert and I had spent countless mornings together, sipping coffee, planning our day. But today the kitchen felt cold, devoid of the warmth that had once filled it. The silence was suffocating. I stood there for a moment, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I couldn't help but think about Tom's words again. You don't belong here anymore. I had spent so many years devoted to this family, giving everything I had to ensure their happiness. But it wasn't enough. They wanted me gone. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I couldn't let them break me. I wouldn't let them take everything away from me. I reached for the phone and dialed the number of the lawyer who had handled Robert's estate. I needed to know exactly what was going on. I couldn't trust Tom, and I certainly couldn't trust Romy. I needed answers. The lawyer answered after a few rings. "Helen, how are you doing?" he asked kindly. I could hear the sympathy in his voice, but I wasn't looking for sympathy. "I need to know everything about Robert's will," I said, my voice firm. "I need to know if there's anything I missed, anything that could explain why my son is treating me like this." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Helen," the lawyer said softly, "I'm afraid there's nothing in the will that would change your situation. Robert left everything to you. His estate, his assets, the house. It's all yours." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but it was quickly replaced by frustration. Then why is Tom doing this? Why is he trying to push me out? I asked, my voice cracking. The lawyer sighed. "I'm sorry, Helen. I don't know. But I do know that you have the legal right to stay in that house. You don't have to leave. You've done nothing wrong." I hung up the phone, my mind racing. Tom couldn't take this house away from me. It was mine. Robert had made sure of that. But what was his plan? Why was he trying to force me out? I knew I couldn't confront him yet. He would just lie like he always did. I needed to be smart about this. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house, going through old papers, looking for anything that could give me a clue as to what Tom was planning. But there was nothing. It was as if he had covered his tracks perfectly. The house was silent, and I felt more alone than ever. That evening, Tom and Romy came over for dinner, and I could tell something was off. They both seemed tense, avoiding eye contact with me. It was as if they were trying to keep up appearances, pretending that everything was normal. But I could see through it. They were hiding something. We sat down at the table and I tried to make conversation, but it was like pulling teeth. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "Tom," I said, my voice steady, "I know what you're doing. I know you and Romy have been planning to sell the house." Tom's eyes widened, and for a brief moment, I saw guilt flicker in his gaze. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "What are you talking about, Mom?" he asked, his voice too calm, too rehearsed. "Don't play games with me," I replied. "I know everything. You think I'm too old to take care of this house, but I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. Romy shifted uncomfortably in her chair, and Tom looked away, refusing to meet my eyes. You don't understand, Tom said, his tone sharp now. This house is too much for you. You need to move somewhere more practical. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice unwavering. I don't care what you and Romy think. This is my home, and I have every right to stay here. There was a long pause. Tom opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. I've made my decision, I said firmly. You can try to force me out, but it won't work. Tom stood up abruptly, knocking his chair over in the process. He glared at me, his face red with anger. You think you can just stay here forever? He spat. This house isn't yours anymore. It's mine. You were never a part of it, and you never will be again. His words were like a slap to my face, but I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. You've already lost me, Tom, I said quietly, my voice filled with resolve. And I won't let you take this house from me. I watched as Tom stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Romy didn't say a word. She just sat there staring at her plate. I turned away and walked back upstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew this wasn't over. But I also knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. Not this time. The next few days felt like a blur. Tom and Romy didn't come by the house, and I didn't hear from them either. The silence was deafening, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a world where nothing was the same anymore. Every corner of the house seemed to hold a memory of Robert, and it made the emptiness that much harder to bear. I tried to keep myself busy, organizing the closets, cleaning the kitchen, anything to fill the time and distract me from the pain. But every time I looked around, I was reminded of the family that had abandoned me. It wasn't just the house that felt different. It was my entire life. I had spent years caring for them, making sure everything was in order, being there for Tom when he needed me, supporting him through all the highs and lows. And this was how I was repaid. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. I couldn't let them walk all over me anymore. I couldn't let them control me. I had to take back my life. The next week, I decided to do something I had been putting off for far too long. I called a real estate agent. I needed to know the value of the house. I needed to know my options. I wasn't ready to give up yet, but I had to be prepared. The agent came by and gave me an estimate. The house was worth more than I expected. It had always been Robert's pride and joy, and I knew it meant a lot to him. It meant a lot to me too. But now it was just a house. A house that held memories, but a house that had also become a symbol of the pain I had been through. I thought about what I would do next. If I stayed, I knew it would be a constant reminder of everything I had lost. But if I sold it, I was letting Tom win. I couldn't let him have that satisfaction. I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sell. I wasn't going to let them push me out. I was going to stay here in the house Robert and I had built, and I was going to make it mine again. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for whatever came next. A few days later, Tom came by unexpectedly. He looked nervous, his usual confidence replaced with uncertainty. He stood at the door, shifting from foot to foot, like he didn't know what to say. "Mom," he said, his voice hesitant. "Can we talk?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stood there looking at him. The anger I felt toward him was still raw, but I wasn't going to let him see that. "What do you want, Tom?" I finally asked, my voice cold. He flinched at the tone, but he pressed on. "I know things have been difficult lately," he said, his words coming out slowly. "But I just want you to know I didn't mean to hurt you. Romy and we were just worried about you. The house is too much for you to handle. You need to think about your future." I stared at him, feeling the weight of his words. "My future?" I repeated, the bitterness rising in my chest. "You're worried about my future? You want to throw me out of my own home, and now you're pretending like you care about me." He looked down, his face reddening with embarrassment. "No, Mom, that's not what I meant. I just want what's best for you." I shook my head, stepping back from the door. "You don't get to decide what's best for me, Tom," I said, my voice firm. "I've lived my life. I've made my choices. I don't need you and Romy telling me what I should do." There was A long pause as Tom stood there, unsure of what to say. I could see the guilt on his face, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough to make up for the things he had said to me, for the way he had treated me. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, finally breaking the silence. "This is my home and I'm staying." Tom opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand to stop him. "I don't want to hear it, Tom. I've made my decision. If you and Romy want to be part of my life, that's fine. But I'm not going to be treated like a burden anymore." He stared at me for a moment, then nodded, his face still full of regret. "Okay, Mom," he said quietly. "I understand." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway. I watched him go, my heart heavy but my resolve stronger than ever. I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, and I wasn't going to let them control me any longer. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't over yet, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life. I wasn't going to let Tom and Romy take that from me. I was going to fight for what was mine. I had Robert's love and I had my own strength, and that was all I needed. The days passed slowly after Tom left, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still not right. His apology, if you could even call it that, felt empty. His words were soft, but I couldn't forget how they had cut through me when he told me I didn't belong. He was my son. How had things gotten this bad? I spent the next few days keeping to myself. I tried to stay busy around the house, but every corner I turned, every room I entered, there were memories of Robert. It was a bittersweet feeling, a constant reminder of the love we once had, and now the emptiness I was left with. I walked through the house, touching the furniture we had carefully picked out together, looking at the pictures of happier times, but it didn't bring me comfort anymore. It only made me feel more alone. Tom hadn't called, and neither had Romy. The silence was deafening, and it only made me question what they were really up to. I couldn't just sit here and wait for them to decide my fate. I had to take action. I wasn't going to be pushed around, not anymore. That afternoon, I decided to go through the papers again. There had to be something I missed. I couldn't let them take this house from me, not after everything Robert and I had worked for. As I sifted through the files, one letter caught my attention. It was an old letter from Robert, one that I hadn't read in years. It was a letter he had written to me when we were still planning for our future. In it, he talked about how much he loved me, and how he hoped that we would always have a home to call our own. He had written that he wanted me to be happy and that, no matter what happened, this house would always be ours. I felt a lump form in my throat as I read those words. Robert had always been there for me, and now I felt like I was losing everything we had built together. But as I sat there with that letter in my hands, something inside me clicked. I wasn't going to let Tom or Romy take this from me. I had every right to stay in this house. This was my home. I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out at the garden where Robert used to spend hours planting flowers. It was peaceful out there, just like the life we once had. But now everything had changed. I couldn't let it stay this way. I had to take back control. That evening I called the lawyer. I needed to make sure everything was in order. I wasn't going to let Tom take advantage of me, not again. "Helen, it's good to hear from you," the lawyer said when he picked up. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine," I said, my voice steady. "I just need to make sure everything is still in place with Robert's will. I want to be sure there's nothing I'm missing." The lawyer paused for a moment. "Helen, everything is in order. Robert left everything to you. The house, the assets, the estate. It's all yours. There's no question about that." I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but I didn't let my guard down. "I know that, but Tom has been making it clear that he wants me out of here," I said, my voice tightening. "I can't let him push me out of my own home." "Helen, you don't have to worry," the lawyer reassured me. "You are legally entitled to stay in the house. There's no way he can take that from you." I closed my eyes, taking in the words. I had known that deep down, but hearing it from the lawyer made me feel more confident. Tom couldn't take the house from me. I wasn't going to let him. "Thank you," I said, feeling a sense of relief. I just needed to hear that. After I hung up, I sat there for a moment, thinking about what to do next. I knew I couldn't confront Tom again just yet, but I also knew that I couldn't sit idly by while he made plans behind my back. I had to act. I spent the next few days making preparations. I contacted a few local contractors to come by and make some minor repairs around the house. Nothing big, just enough to make the place feel like my own again. I didn't need to prove anything to anyone, but I needed to feel like I was in control of my life. I wasn't going to let Tom and Romy take everything from me. The contractors arrived a few days later, and I spent the morning showing them around the house, pointing out the areas that needed work. As they worked, I spent my time in the garden planting new flowers and taking care of the yard. It felt good to be doing something for myself, something that was just for me. But even as I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. I knew that Tom and Romy wouldn't give up easily. They were going to fight for what they thought was theirs, and I had to be prepared. That afternoon, Tom came by again. He didn't knock, just walked right in like he owned the place. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for him to speak. "Mom," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Can we talk?" "About what?" I asked, my voice cold. Tom hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I know things have been tense. I'm sorry for what I said, but you have to understand, I was just trying to do what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You want to throw me out of my home, and you think that's what's best for me?" Tom looked down at the floor, his face flushing with shame. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quietly. I just want to make sure you're okay. I don't want you to be alone." "I'm not alone," I said, cutting him off. "I've been alone before, and I'll be alone again if I have to. But I'm not going to let you take my home from me." Tom opened his mouth to say something, but I held up my hand. "You've already said enough," I said. "I don't need to hear any more." Tom stared at me for a moment, his face a mixture of guilt and frustration. Then, without saying another word, he turned and walked out of the room. I stood there, my heart pounding, but I didn't feel the anger I had before. I felt something different now, something stronger. I wasn't going to let him control me. I was going to take back my life, and I wasn't going to back down. Not this time. The days after Tom's visit were filled with silence, but the quiet didn't bring peace. It made my thoughts louder, more demanding. I had hoped his apology, even if half-hearted, would bring some clarity, but it only deepened my uncertainty. I couldn't understand how someone who had once been so close to me, my son, could turn on me so easily. I had spent years nurturing him, loving him unconditionally, and this is what I got in return. A house I'd built with Robert, memories I cherished, and the pain of betrayal from the very people I had trusted the most. I couldn't shake the feeling that Tom wasn't just after the house. No, there was something more to it. There always had been. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. He and Romy had been planning this for a long time. It wasn't just about the house. It was about control. They wanted to control everything that Robert and I had worked so hard for. I wasn't going to let them have that. I couldn't. The next morning, I decided to take a walk in the garden. The sun was rising, casting a soft glow over the flowers Robert had planted. For a moment, I allowed myself to remember the good times. Robert and I had spent so many mornings out here, laughing together, planning our future. But now that future seemed so far away. I closed my eyes and inhaled deeply, the scent of the flowers grounding me. I had to remind myself of something. I was stronger than I realized. I had always been. I had spent so many years putting my family first, putting their needs before mine. But this time it was my turn. I needed to reclaim my life. I wasn't going to let them dictate my future. As the day wore on, I made a decision. I needed to get out of the house. I needed to clear my mind, to get away from the walls that held so many memories. I called a friend I hadn't spoken to in years, someone who had been close to Robert and me in the past. Her name was Marie, and she had always been a good listener. She picked up the phone on the second ring. "Helen," she said, her voice warm and familiar. "It's been so long. How are you?" "Not great," I replied, my voice barely a whisper. "I need to get away for a while. I need to clear my head. Would you mind if I came to visit?" There was a pause, and then she responded, "Of course, you're always welcome here. I'll be waiting for you." I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief. Marie lived a few hours away, in a small town by the lake. The idea of getting away, even for a short time, felt like a breath of fresh air. I spent the next hour packing a bag, grabbing only the essentials. I wasn't planning on staying long, but I needed to get out of this house. I needed to get away from the ghosts that lingered here. When I arrived at Marie's house, I was greeted with a warm hug. "You look like you could use a drink," she said, leading me into the living room. The house was cozy, a welcome change from the coldness I had been living with. As I sank into the couch, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Marie handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me. "Tell me what's going on," she said softly. And so I did. I told her everything, the way Tom had turned on me, how Romy had been scheming behind my back, and how I felt like I was losing everything. As I spoke, I could feel the tension in my chest ease. Marie listened without interrupting, her eyes filled with sympathy. When I finished, she placed a hand on mine. "Helen, you've been through so much, but you're stronger than you realize. You don't have to let them take everything from you." Her words hit me hard, and for the first time in days I felt like I could breathe again. Marie was right. I didn't have to let them take everything. I had the strength to fight for what was mine. The next few days were a blur of quiet reflection and long walks by the lake. I spent time with Marie, catching up on old memories, but all the while my mind was working. I knew I couldn't let Tom and Romy win. I couldn't let them control my life. I had to take back what was mine. On the third day I returned home. As I walked through the front door, I felt a surge of determination. This was my home. This was my life. And I wasn't going to let them take it from me. I spent the evening making a plan. I contacted a financial advisor to help me manage Robert's estate and ensure that everything was in order. I wasn't going to let Tom have a say in it anymore. I had the right to manage the estate, and I was going to do it. The next day I called Tom. "We need to talk," I said when he answered the phone. "Mom," he replied, his voice filled with uncertainty. "I thought we were past this." "We're not," I said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere, Tom. This is my home and I'm staying here. I've taken steps to secure my future, and you're not going to control me anymore." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold. "You think you can just do whatever you want? This house is mine too." "No, Tom," I said, my voice unwavering. "This house is mine. Robert left it to me, and I'm not going to let you take it from me." Tom was quiet for a moment, and then he let out a sigh. "I don't know what to say," he muttered. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "But know this, I'm not going to back down. I'm done letting you push me around." With that, I hung up the phone. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. I wasn't going to let anyone take my home, my life away from me. This was my time, and I was going to fight for it. Days passed, and though I had made my decision, the weight of the situation still hung over me. I had taken a stand, and now I had to see it through. The silence between Tom and me grew longer, and though part of me was relieved to be away from the tension, another part of me couldn't help but feel the emptiness. I had done what I thought was right, but it wasn't easy. I hadn't seen Tom since that last phone call, and Romy hadn't made a single attempt to reach out. It felt like they were waiting for me to crumble, for me to give up. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. The house felt heavier with each passing day, its silence an ever-present reminder of everything that had happened. But I wasn't backing down. I had made my plans, and I had to follow through. A few weeks later, Tom called me again. This time there was a slight change in his voice. He wasn't as defensive, not as cold as before. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his tone softer. I felt a surge of cautious hope, but I didn't let it show. "About what?" I asked, my voice neutral. "About the house," he replied. I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "I know things have been rough, and I know I've said some things I shouldn't have. But I've been thinking, maybe we can work something out." I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to believe that he was sincere, that maybe he had a change of heart. But I had learned the hard way not to trust easily. "What exactly are you proposing?" I asked, trying to keep my emotions in check. There was a long pause before Tom spoke again. "Look, I know you're not going to sell. And I get it, okay? But maybe there's a way for us to come to an agreement. I don't want this to tear us apart, Mom. I just want us to be okay." His words hung in the air, and I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Maybe he was finally starting to understand. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I've spent a lot of years giving everything I had for this family, I said, my voice firm. And I've been pushed aside, treated like I don't matter. I'm not just going to forget that. Tom was silent for a moment. I could tell he was processing what I had said. I know, he replied finally. I know I've made mistakes. And I'm sorry, Mom. I really am. I didn't know if he was truly sorry, or if he was just saying what he thought I wanted to hear. But I wasn't ready to forgive him just yet. Not completely. Sorry doesn't fix things, Tom, I said, my voice quiet but resolute. You can't just erase what's happened. You can't take back the hurt you caused. He didn't argue with me. Instead, there was a long silence, and I could hear the regret in his breath. I know, he said again. But I'm asking for another chance. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I don't want us to be strangers. I stood there for a long moment, staring out the window, weighing my options. I had been so hurt by him, by all of them, but part of me still wanted to believe in the family we once had. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to rebuild what we had lost. I don't know if I can trust you again, Tom, I finally said. But I'm willing to try. For now, we'll take things one step at a time. But don't expect me to forget. I won't, he replied. And I won't let you down again, I promise. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of emotions. Relief, hope, and doubt. I didn't know if I could ever fully trust Tom again, but at least we were talking. At least he was trying. And that was something. Over the next few days, things started to shift. Tom began visiting more often, helping around the house, even offering to fix things that had been left unattended for too long. Romy, however, kept her distance. She still didn't speak to me, and when I did see her, she seemed cold, distant, as if nothing had changed. But I wasn't going to let that bother me. I wasn't going to let Romy or anyone else control my life anymore. It was my time to take charge, to make the decisions that would shape my future. Tom's efforts were a start, but I wasn't going to let him off easy. He had to prove that he was truly sorry, that he was willing to change. And I wasn't going to settle for anything less. The days passed, and the house slowly began to feel like home again. The tension wasn't gone, not entirely, but there was a sense of possibility now. I wasn't going to give up on my family, but I wasn't going to let them walk all over me either. I had learned the hard way that I had to stand up for myself no matter what. And I would. No matter what happened next, I would stand my ground. I wasn't just a victim in this story. I was the one in control now. I was taking back my life. It had been weeks since Tom and I had that conversation, and slowly things were starting to change. There were no grand gestures, no immediate reconciliation, but there were small signs of progress. He was helping around the house more, offering to take care of things I used to do alone, like getting the groceries or fixing the leaky faucet in the kitchen. His efforts didn't go unnoticed, but they didn't erase everything that had happened. Romy, on the other hand, remained distant. She didn't acknowledge me much, still keeping her cold, indifferent attitude. I didn't mind. At least for now, I didn't feel the need to deal with her. It was Tom who I had to focus on. His change wasn't perfect, but it was something. And something was better than nothing. As the weeks passed, I began to realize that perhaps this was the beginning of something new. Not a perfect family, not a return to the way things were, but something different. Something that was mine. I had been holding on to the past for so long, expecting everything to go back to how it once was. But I had to accept that things were never going to be the same. What I could do, though, was make a future that worked for me. I wasn't going to live in the shadow of my old life. Nor was I going to let my son control my future anymore. The house felt like a battleground, but as time went on, I started making it my own again. I decided to redecorate, to add touches that reflected who I was now, not just who I had been. I picked out new curtains for the living room, changed the color scheme in the kitchen, even planted a new garden in the backyard. Robert's presence was still there, in the corners of every room, in the photos on the walls, in the furniture we had picked out together, but now it was mixed with my own sense of independence. I wasn't just surviving in this house. I was living in it, building a life of my own, separate from the memories that had once held me captive. One evening, Tom came over, just as I was finishing up in the garden. He stood by the gate, watching me for a moment before he spoke. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, his voice hesitant. I wiped my hands on my apron and walked toward him. About what? I asked, my tone calm but firm. I've been thinking about what you said. He began, taking a deep breath. About how I've treated you. And I realize now that I've been wrong. I didn't say anything, just waited for him to continue. He shifted uncomfortably, his hands shoved in his pockets. I know I've hurt you, he said quietly, and I'm sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I want to make things right. For a moment I couldn't speak. It wasn't what I had expected. I had anticipated more excuses, more justifications. But this was different. I've been thinking about what I want for the future, Tom continued. And I want you to be a part of it. I don't want to lose you, Mom. I know I've been selfish, and I know it's going to take time, but I want to try. His words were raw, sincere, and for the first time in a long while I saw the son I had raised, the son who once made me proud. But I wasn't ready to forgive him just yet. Tom, I said after a moment, my voice steady, it's not that simple. You can't just expect things to go back to normal. It's going to take time. And trust isn't something you can just rebuild overnight. Tom nodded, his gaze dropping to the ground. I know. I understand that. I could see the pain in his eyes, and though I felt a flicker of compassion, I didn't let it sway me. I've been hurt, Tom. You can't take that back. But I'll give you a chance. Not to fix everything, but to show me that you really mean what you're saying. He looked up at me, his face filled with gratitude. Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down. I promise. I didn't reply, just nodded, and we stood there for a moment, in the silence of the garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of calm. Not resolution, not total peace, but calm. Like the storm had passed and now there was a chance to rebuild. The next few days were a slow process of rebuilding trust. Tom kept his word. He showed up, helped out around the house, and most importantly, kept his distance when I needed it. Romy remained distant, but I didn't let that bother me. She wasn't the one I was focused on right now. Tom was. And I had to see if his actions would match his words. There were moments when it felt like we were making progress. And then there were moments when I would catch myself slipping into old patterns, the hurt and anger bubbling up. But I kept telling myself that this was a journey. It wasn't going to happen overnight. It couldn't. Trust wasn't built in a day, and forgiveness wasn't instant. But it was possible. I had to believe that. One afternoon I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Tom came in, holding a small box in his hands. I brought you something, he said, his voice soft. I turned to look at him, curious. He handed me the box and I opened it carefully. Inside was a small framed photo of Robert and me taken years ago during one of our trips. We were smiling, standing by the lake, just happy to be together. I thought you might like this, Tom said quietly. I know it's been hard and I know I've messed up, but I want to make things right. I looked at the photo, then at Tom, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the son I had loved so much. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The tension between us had softened just a little. It wasn't fixed. It wasn't perfect. But it was a start. And that was enough for me. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't walking it alone. I had a son who was trying, and I was willing to try too. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for us to rebuild what we had lost. The weeks that followed were filled with uncertainty. But there was a strange calmness in the air. Tom was trying and I could see it. I had spent so many years being the one to put everyone else's needs first that it felt unfamiliar to have someone else make an effort for me. But I wasn't going to let my guard down too quickly. Not yet. The house had become a symbol of my strength. Robert had left it to me, and for a long time it had been a place of both comfort and pain. It was where we built our lives, but it was also where I had experienced the deepest wounds. But now it was mine to reclaim, and I was taking my time doing it. Tom kept coming by. Sometimes he'd help with small repairs around the house, or he'd bring groceries. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show me that he was trying to make amends. I still wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive him, but I was willing to take things slowly, to let the past settle and see where it took us. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the living room, flipping through a photo album, I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. It was Tom again. I stood up and walked to the door, taking a deep breath before opening it. "Mom," he said with a hesitant smile. "Can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to expect, but then I nodded and stepped aside to let him in. He had something in his hands, a small wrapped box. "I know I've made mistakes, Mom," he started, his voice sincere. "And I know I can't just take back the things I've done. But I want to show you that I'm not the same person I was." I looked at him, unsure of where this was going, but I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. He handed me the box, his hands shaking slightly. I took it, carefully unwrapping it. Inside was a small jewelry box, and when I opened it, I found a delicate silver bracelet. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was beautiful, and it touched me more than I expected. "It's for you," Tom said softly. "I know it's just a small gesture, but I want you to know that I'm here, and I want to make things right." For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My emotions were all tangled up. I had spent so many years holding on to the hurt, and now here was my son, offering something as simple as a bracelet, yet it felt like he was offering me so much more. "Thank you," I said, my voice quiet but filled with meaning. He smiled, a genuine smile this time, not the guarded one he used to wear. "I want to be there for you, Mom," he said. "I know I haven't been the son you deserved, but I want to try." I nodded slowly, taking in his words. "I'm not sure how long it will take to heal, Tom," I said, "but I appreciate this. And I'm willing to give you the chance to prove that you can be the son I always hoped you would be." The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I felt like we were on the same page. It wasn't a perfect moment, but it was a start. Over the next few weeks, things continued to shift. Tom's efforts didn't go unnoticed. He spent more time with me, helping out when I needed it, and slowly we began to rebuild our relationship. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was enough. I wasn't looking for grand gestures anymore. I just wanted him to be honest, to show me that he cared, and little by little, he was doing just that. Romy, however, continued to stay distant. She didn't come by, and when she did, it was only for brief moments. I could see the tension in her eyes whenever Tom and I spoke, and though I didn't let it bother me, it wasn't easy to ignore. I had to remind myself that I couldn't control her, and I wasn't going to let her get in the way of my healing. It was Tom I was focusing on now. As the days went by, I spent more time doing things that made me happy, reading, gardening, even taking walks around the neighborhood. I wasn't just living in the house anymore. I was starting to live for myself. Tom's visits became a regular thing. He'd stop by after work, and we'd sit in the kitchen talking about anything and everything. It was strange in a way. We hadn't done this in years. Robert used to sit with us, and now it felt like a space that had been left open for us to fill. I had to admit, I was enjoying these quiet moments with my son. One evening, Tom and I were sitting at the dinner table when he suddenly looked at me with a serious expression. "Mom," he said, "there's something I need to tell you." I looked at him, setting down my fork. "What is it?" I asked, a slight sense of unease creeping in. "I've been thinking about what you said about us rebuilding our relationship," Tom began, "and I realized something." I waited, my heart beating faster. "What did you realize?" I asked. "I realized that I've been holding on to a lot of anger," he said, his voice softer now. "And I've been taking it out on you. I never should have treated you the way I did." His words hit me hard, more than I expected. I had spent so many years trying to protect him, trying to help him become the man I thought he could be. But here he was, admitting his mistakes, taking responsibility for them. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. "Tom," I said quietly, "it's not easy, you know. I can't just forget the past. But I'm willing to move forward one step at a time." He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get it, Mom. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to make things right. I know it won't happen overnight, but I want to try." The weight of his words lingered in the air between us, but this time, it felt like something had shifted. It felt like we were on the right path, even if it was a slow and uncertain one. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least we were walking it together. And for the first time in years, I felt hopeful for what the future might hold. The weeks passed, and the distance between Tom and me began to shrink, but it wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when the old wounds flared up, reminders of everything that had been broken. Romy still kept her distance and I could sense the tension between her and Tom, but for now I focused on what mattered, my relationship with my son and my own healing. Tom came by more often, and with each visit I saw glimpses of the man he could be, the man I had always hoped he would become. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when the walls I had built around my heart felt like they were going to crumble. But I kept reminding myself that I couldn't force the healing process. Trust, once broken, couldn't be repaired overnight. Still, there was progress. One afternoon, Tom came by to check on me. He had been working long hours at the office, and I hadn't seen him in a few days. As he walked through the door, I noticed something different about him. There was a softness in his eyes, a gentleness that had been absent for so long. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in the doorway, looking at me as if he were trying to find the right words. "Mom," he said finally, his voice a little uncertain. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About the past, about us." I looked up at him, waiting for him to continue. He took a deep breath before speaking again. "I know I've made so many mistakes. I've hurt you and I can't take that back. But I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be the son you deserve." His words hung in the air, and for a moment I couldn't speak. I wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that he was sincere, but there was still a part of me that was afraid to let go of the past. I had been hurt too many times to simply forgive and forget. "Tom," I said slowly, my voice steady, "I want to believe you, but it's not that simple. You've hurt me and that's not something I can just forget. I need time." He nodded, his expression softening. "I understand, Mom, and I'll give you all the time you need. I just want you to know that I'm here. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to give up on us." The sincerity in his voice hit me harder than I expected, and I felt something shift inside me. Maybe it wasn't all lost. Maybe there was a chance for us to rebuild what had been broken. But I wasn't ready to let down my guard completely. "Not yet. I'm not ready to forgive you completely, Tom," I said, the words feeling heavy in my chest. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to take things one step at a time." He smiled, a genuine smile this time, and I saw the son I had once known in his eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Over the next few weeks, Tom continued to show up, and slowly I started to let him back into my life. I still kept my distance, still held on to my boundaries, but I could see that he was trying. We spent more time together, talking about everything and nothing, and those conversations began to feel more natural. More like the mother and son we had been. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I had moments when I doubted, when I wondered if this was just another false hope. But then I would remember how far we had come. We were rebuilding, even if it was brick by brick. One afternoon, after a long day of working in the garden, I sat down on the porch with a glass of lemonade. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the yard, and for the first time in a long time I felt at peace. It wasn't the peace I had once known with Robert, but it was a new kind of peace. Peace I had fought for. Tom came outside and sat down beside me, his presence comforting. For a while we just sat there in silence, watching the sunset. It wasn't an awkward silence. It was the kind of silence that came when two people were finally beginning to understand each other again. "I'm glad you're here, Mom," he said quietly, breaking the silence. I turned to look at him, surprised by the sincerity in his voice.
"I'm glad too," he replied softly.
"But it's going to take time, Tom. Time for both of us." He nodded, understanding. "I know, but I'm willing to wait. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." The words were simple, but they carried a weight I hadn't expected. I didn't know if he could make things right, but I knew that for the first time I wasn't alone in this fight. I had my son back, and that, in itself, was a step toward healing. The days that followed were filled with small, quiet moments, moments where I could see the change in him, moments where I could feel the change in myself. It wasn't an easy road, and I knew that there would be setbacks, but I also knew that we were finally moving forward. It wasn't perfect, but maybe, just maybe, it was enough. As I stood in the kitchen one evening preparing dinner, I thought about how far we had come. The house still held the echoes of the past, the memories of better days, but it was also filled with new moments. New memories. Tom and I were starting to rebuild, starting to heal the wounds that had been buried for so long. And though I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let go of the chance for a better tomorrow. I had lost so much, but now I had something worth fighting for.